Welcome back to Universal Journeys, everyone. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. Even if you mentally fixate on the particular paths, follow the right one, right? We have had a fun time this morning trying to get technology to work, and we're gonna go for it. We're gonna go for it. So Universal Journeys is about redefining ourselves to match the soul's purpose by illuminating the threads which intertwine creativity, spirituality, and identity. These threads encourage, empower, and enlighten us on our own respective journeys. Brenda, hello, my dear.
Hello.
How are you
And
managing?
we certainly have had an interesting time. Oh, we're doing good.
We've been in different rooms. Remember when we were kids and we had to like move the antennas on like a television to get it the right.
Right,
I feel like
right.
that's what we've been doing today to make sure the technology is working. And you know what? It's
That's
all
telling our age.
I know, right? Yeah. I'll never forget my grandma and her television. And I had to like finagle it. And then the antenna on the roof, we had to move that. And it's just like,
Right.
and now we have these digital connections and it feels like we're in a different universe altogether.
Yeah, but we still had to do something similar to that. We had
We
definitely
still,
had to fixate on this.
we still had to break out the duct tape
Yeah.
and fix everything. I love it. So,
Oh, it was funny.
technology frustrations aside, what have you been doing? How have you been? What have you been up to?
I actually been doing much better than I have been. And I'm just going to say it this way, I am fixating on doing more meditations. And I have gone into doing or reading an autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda. And then I'm doing some other, what do you want to call it here? It is for helping me to do more prosperously
Oh, like
through my value.
manifesting.
Manifesting, yes. So, and I think some of that energy is going back and forth because, you're going from one aspect to another aspect, and it's just kind of doing the little wild and crazy stuff here right now.
Well, you know what, Brenda? When you get a Capricorn and a Taurus together and there's a problem, you know we're going to fix the problem because that's what we do.
And we did. And we
And
did.
we did. And we did. We fixated and then fixed.
That's exactly.
Fixate and fix. Oh my
Exactly.
goodness. So for me, I've been doing a lot of like spring cleaning, not only like mentally but physically, and then also like the
Mhm.
house. Like I've been trying to do like some cleaning. The winter, doldrums are now kind of like pulling away, and I'm like, all right, let's get things cleaned up and situated and organized. Have I been entirely successful at doing that? No. But it's a work
Yeah.
in progress. It's something that I've been fixating on. Um, but I've also been like, Britt and I've been doing some like light dieting. So, like, I've been trying to like physically prioritize my physical health a little bit between that and like doing a bit of exercise every other day, and it's been very good. I've been feeling much more energized. I've been feeling mentally, it's helped me feel like I have my crap together, which for me is a rarity. um so so yay for that. And I've been doing a little bit of creating, so a little dollop. Think of it as like a little plate with a buffet of a dollop of everything.
Right, right. Well, the other thing too is I've been doing more with the VA. And the other day I had well, I did a couple different things. On Monday I did started Tai Chi. So speaking of trying to do some sort of exercise and movement and stuff like that. So I did that, and then I mean, I had something going on, it seemed like every day this last week with the VA. And then Thursday I went to no, was it? Yeah, it was Thursday. Thursday, I went and had my first acupuncture session.
Oh, and how did that go?
That actually didn't do too bad. I mean, it's the first one, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, when I was sitting in the chair, I definitely got some warmthness in my neck area and then right across my heart.
Hmm.
So I knew something was happening there because that's one of those things that, that I want to work on. So
That's exciting,
doing
though.
something.
Try new things, right? Try new things. I
Right,
feel like that's
right.
kind of been 2024 in a nutshell so far. So, well, spring is on the horizon. Do you have any like spring plans? How are you feeling about that?
Well, I do. I want to get outside and take the covers off of my babies, which are my roses. But the other night when I woke up, or the other morning when I woke up, during the night it had frosted. So if I would have taken that covering off of them, they would have gotten frosted. But on the other side of that is there, it's just being warm outside, and I don't know what that will do to the roses if I keep them covered. But
Hmm.
I'm afraid we're going to get a huge snowstorm, and it's going to mess them up.
Yeah, I've been
So,
kind of worried about that too.
mhm,
Well, so the other day, I mean, we February 28th, I think, wasn't it like 70 degrees?
mhm,
If it was beautiful out, but it felt like very surreal. Like it felt kind of unsettling to me. But
mhm.
because of that warm day, like I literally have tulips sprouting, irises, glads, like lilies, like all of my flower bed plants are sprouting like 20 days early because of the uncharacteristically warm weather we've been having. And I'm on cloud nine that my plants are growing early, but I'm also like terrified. I'm like, oh no, if we get a snowstorm in April, which we know can happen,
Yep.
I'm afraid it's going to completely obliterate everything. And then it's going to be starting from square one again. So I am manifesting nice weather from here on out so that does not happen. Because I can't cover my whole like we have a pretty huge we have huge flower beds. I can't cover them all up, right? So that's what the mulch is supposed to do.
Right. Well, I mean, and really, the mulch only covers the base of them. It doesn't cover the leaves and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, so, but luckily, the cover that I have on it is just like a sheet type of thing. It's not necessarily the rose cones, which will get much hotter if it's left on. Those are left on that way.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I don't know. It depends. I still have to look at the Farmer's Almanac, the old Farmer's Almanac, not the new one, because the new one's not very accurate. But the old
No.
Farmer's Almanac is pretty accurate. And to be honest with you, I don't think we're going to get any more snow from what I read.
Hmm.
However, you just never know. We're in Michigan. Michigan, like one day it's this, or 1 minute that,
Yeah.
so it just changes. It changes.
I think we're gonna get like a lot of rain. I'm feeling that it's gonna be a very rainy spring. So
I hope so.
yeah, but I am also very excited to garden. I'm already doing planning. This coming Sunday, tomorrow, Britt and I are planning on planting our seeds. So I will be planting seeds. Oh, relatively like 4 or 5 days early from what I did last year. So hopefully that extra head start will be nice for the seeds. So
Yeah, it should be.
you know what's also wild, Brenda?
What's that?
This is technically our 50th episode of Universal Journeys.
Wow, I can't believe it. Pinch me, pinch me.
I know. Well, so I remember when we stopped, because when we returned a couple of episodes ago, we talked about why we stopped. But I also like really struggled. I was like, we are so close to 50 episodes back then. And I was like, we could have just stuck out until 50 episodes. But we
Yeah,
didn't, right?
and all
Um,
we needed was just 3. That was it. We only needed 3 more, and we would have got to 50.
I know, because like that's one thing that I fixate on are thresholds. I love thresholds. So I was like, okay, like this milestone 50 episode, let's get to it. And now we're finally here. And it doesn't like it feels interesting that we are at 50 episodes because well, obviously until recently, until 2024, we hadn't done the show in like 7 or 8 years.
It's been a
So
while.
now that we've hit this milestone that's been in the making this long, how are you feeling?
I feeling more matured.
Brenda, we are still as immature as we used to be. Unless you mean we both have aged in
We
general.
have aged. I didn't want to say aged. We matured.
We've aged. We're like barrels of wine.
Fine
I
wine.
feel I feel like
Fine
I
wine.
feel like I'm shaped like a barrel, but that's besides the point.
No
But
comment on my end. No comment over here.
I do feel like we've aged like fine wine. I don't know. I was looking in the mirror the other day and I was thinking about this in anticipation of the episode. And I was like, I don't feel like physically we look that different. Like, I don't feel like physically we've aged that much in 8 years. Probably because we take good care of ourselves and we have good aging genetics. So,
Well, that's part of that fixation that we want to be youthful and we don't want to look our age, and and we want to be healthy too. Not that I'm at this point particular time that healthy, but I am, and I shouldn't say that because I am, and I just had a stress test done a couple weeks ago, and because I thought I was having issues, or well, I was having issues with my heart and my back, because my back was had a lot of pain in it.
mhm.
So when I went to the doctor, I actually told her that everything that I would never tell her. I was like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. So I just said, "Well, I'm just going to tell her everything that's going on." And oh my gosh, did that open a Pandora's box. I had an appointment for this and that and everything else. But all in all, it was a good result that occurred.
Mhm.
So I'm more than 70% open. So, and that's the normal thing they say. So that's a good thing for the heart. And then I was having issues with my mood swings and everything else. I am getting older, but it was much more than that. It had to do with my thyroid. And once I started taking the thyroid medication, I feel much, much, much better and more grounded.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you took those crucial steps, right? Because that can be kind of scary. So, the theme of our episode are mental fixations today. As if you've not gathered that already with our numerous references to fixations. But I think that talking about health to start is a good way to kind of begin that conversation, because one of my big fixations is health. And let's define what a mental fixation is first before I talk about that. What is a mental fixation in your definition, Brenda?
Well, it's something, it could be an object, it could be a thought, it could be just about anything that you fixate on. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act upon it, but it is something that you fixate on. It's very, very, very similar to obsession.
Oh, like obsessive compulsiveness and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes, and
Mhm.
and it's something because what we were doing earlier today when we were having the debacle with the computers and the online and internet and everything else, we were fixating on fixing it, and we were going to make sure that we fixed it so that we could go on and do what we needed to do. And look what we did. We're here. That's a good fixation.
Yes. I think that the fine line, there's a line between fixation and like spiraling. Because like I think we together prevented ourselves from spiraling, but on my own, if I'm trying to solve a problem and I'm not doing well at it, it can cause me to spiral and I'll like get really pissed and it'll be like, what's going on?
Right.
Um, I don't know if you get that. Do you ever get that way too?
I do, but I've learned in part of the definition of that fixation in that particular instance is if you keep going with it, you keep getting upset. Now to stop that spiral is to get up and walk away for a while, you know, and by walking away, you're stopping that spiraling, and all of a sudden there's like this idea, oh, well, let me try this, and then it works. So try not to fixate on that so much.
No.
Get up and
So
walk away.
you gotta do that sometimes, right?
You do.
Or like I know like some like I try to give myself what I call reality checks. I'm like, okay, I have this unrealistic expectation about this particular thing or situation or person. What am I doing to kind of exasperate it? What am I doing to kind of add an energy to it that's not supposed to be what it is, right? And if I'm able to ask that question, that's how I know I've not spiraled yet.
What the other thing too is, and this is something I was taught when I went to, or before I went to Peru in 2004, and is go into anything without any expectations and you will be pleasantly surprised at the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at, okay, this is how I expect it to be done, then a lot of times it's not completed the way you expected it to be done. And then you're dissatisfied. So if you go into anything or any situation or look at something like, oh, well, he should have been made a little bit different than this. um,
Not
so
R2D2.
R2D2.
Yes.
So, but if we go into situations and even when we start to think about our relationships and stuff, if we go in without any expectations, we will come out on the other end much happier than if we go in with an expectation.
Yeah. And it can be difficult getting into that headspace. Like, I know, like, for me, like, I mean, we're human beings, we're emotional, we can be irrational sometimes. And sometimes just that logic brain voice doesn't always come through very clearly when
Yep.
the heart voice is like, but I feel this and this seems sensible, right? Right.
Well, it is true. You have to. It's an effort because you have to try to balance your heart with your head.
Yeah.
And that's not always an easy thing, or your head with your heart in some instances. And it's not always an easy thing. However, practice makes perfect without
Beautifully
any
said.
expectation.
Practice without expectation.
There you go.
So going back to the health thing. So health is actually one of my mental fixations that I tend to spiral over. So rewind a year ago. Over the summertime, I had to get a biopsy done because I had a spot that was like freaking me out. And I had it for like a year. So like for a year, I like fixated on it so much that I was like doing research. I was like, I need to see what this is. And then I had convinced myself that I was terminally ill. And, the spiral of all spirals happened because I was like, oh no, why? I better start making plans. And my doctor was just like, don't go on WebMD, Donny. Donny, don't go on mayoclinic.com. What are you doing?
Yeah, sometimes that's harder.
You're going to
That makes it worse.
catastrophize. Yeah, you're going to catastrophize. And of course, I ended up getting a biopsy, which was kind of a scary experience. But everything was fine. Like nothing was out of the ordinary. I finally took the step to end that fixation,
Yeah.
which helped me feel an astronomical amount of relief, right? So,
It does happen. It does happen. Fixations are interesting things. And you know who first coined fixation?
who?
Sigmund Freud.
Oh.
He was so obsessed or so fixated on trying to figure out things that he always considered sexual in nature.
Mm.
You know, uh, to me, that was definitely a fixation for sure. And I think it was just because he enjoyed he enjoyed the sex.
Well, I mean, the body can be a fixation, right?
Yes.
Like emotions, drives toward things can definitely be fixations. Been there, done that before.
Right.
I think it's a very I think I think a lot of people don't realize that some mental fixations can be natural. Like they can be like, I don't want to say the word natural because that's kind of thrown around a lot. A lot of mental fixations are just part of the human experience, right? Like we have drives and emotions that kind of like guide us in different directions. And as long as we go in those directions without hurting other people, harming ourselves, or anything like that, I feel like it's fine. But when it crosses that particular line where it goes into a very unhealthy threshold, that's when it becomes a problem.
Right. And we've talked mostly about fixations that are not necessarily a good thing, but there are a lot of um, stuff that has been come about through people fixating on certain subjects and things. I mean, if someone didn't fixate on figuring out how to do an internet, we wouldn't have internet today.
Yeah, we
If
wouldn't
you
have the
were to
level
think
of
about that.
connection.
Most scientists, if you think about it, most scientists, what they do is they fixate on finding this or that or whatever, and then retrying it, and that's part of that fixation process.
Well, we like even from the context of like artists and musicians and writers and stuff like
Mhm.
that, like
Mhm.
many works of art don't come into being without some artist mentally fixating on producing that and bringing it to life, right?
True, true,
So
true.
I think that that's very telling. So let's talk about our own mental fixation. So we've already talked about health.
Hmm.
What other mental fixations do we have, regardless if they're healthy or unhealthy ones? We can specify what ones they are. Brenda, what are some of your fixations?
Oh, I probably have so many I don't even know where to start. I guess, at one time work was a fixation for me. It's like everything that was my whole life: work, 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 work. You know, which it is for many people, and we don't even realize it. The reason that we fixate on stuff like that is because we have to provide for our families.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a manner of speaking, that is fixation. That's not obsession. That is fixation. There can be a fine line there. Um, or there are times when I fixate on trying to make sure that something comes out that will better me. Say like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to throw this out here, like my Mary Kay business. I at times I fixate on that, and sometimes I overdo it, and nothing occurs. But when I let go and just let it be, and the universe takes over, and it's like, wow, how'd that happen? And it's because I stopped trying to control.
Mm-hmm.
That's another aspect too. Fixation, control. You have that going on too.
Well,
So
when we want to control, it creates those expectations, right?
yes, yes, it
Mm-hmm.
does. It's like, okay, I want it to come out this way and this way, and it's got to be this way, or you know. Uh, but it fixation is such a broad subject. Mental wise. I mean, you can fixate on worrying all the time, and what is that going to do you? What good is it going to do you? It's gonna it's gonna bring anxiety and depression and all the rest of that stuff. But you're fixating on something that you have no control over, in a manner of speaking.
No, it's so true. It's so true. I know, like for me, um, thinking about like productivity, because you were talking about your Mary Kay business, right? Like when it comes to like book stuff, like as an author, like I go through my stints where I'm like, I've not sold a book in months. I'm so depressed about it, blah 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 blah. But then the moment I'm not thinking about it, I will have like numerous sales, and it's like getting shared around, and people are like, oh, ooh, Now, I do think there's a certain degree of investment that we have to make in like putting our stuff out there, which I think can be part of that slippery slope that can kind of create expectations, but that's something we got to do. Now, like YouTube, for example, like I've been on YouTube for like 15 years. And until like this year, I've not really had much success on YouTube. And suddenly In January, randomly, I had a video blow up, and I have like 1,000 new followers on YouTube. I'm a YouTube partner. I'm getting paid to do it now. Like, I didn't need to get paid to do it. I still enjoyed doing it, and I still made time to do it. But like now, it's just kind of, it's like one of those full circle moments where I was like, you know what? I wasn't focusing on it. I wasn't obsessing over it. I wasn't fixating on it. And bam, look what happened.
Yeah.
Did I manifest it? Maybe. Maybe I've been manifesting it over the years. I don't know, right? Uh,
Well, and the thing is instead of fixating on, just like you said, like nothing occurred, nothing happened. But when you stop fixating on it, then things start to flow, and that's because you're allowing the universe, you're allowing God, to step in. Because when you try to control, you don't know all of the avenues that could possibly be open for you if you would stop trying to control it
mm-hmm. Yeah.
and just allow it to happen.
Yeah. And that can permeate so many different aspects of life too. I think that's
Absolutely.
what makes it so interesting. I do have a question of
Sure.
um can mental fixations be rooted in trauma? I do think that they can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are just so many things. I mean, okay, so take this. We talked about in our episode about sexual trauma ourselves, right? We
Yeah.
both went through some of that stuff. If it wasn't for counseling, because we've both been through counseling for that, if it wasn't for counseling and getting us off of that fixation that this was done to me, and we wouldn't be where we're at right now.
Yeah. It takes work to get through it. I think
It
that's what
does take work,
really
especially something like that, or
that
even
yeah.
trauma for accidents and the loss of individuals and things. So it's just
Yeah.
just totally amazing stuff what our brain can formulate and bring into
So
being. So
one of my fixations turned into a phobia over the years.
oh, oh, oh.
So interestingly, from trauma. So I have emetophobia, which is the phobia of vomiting, and so I've been in therapy. Like it came out about a year ago that I started talking about this because I was like, ooh, like this is actually a couple of years ago, because I had hit the 10-year mark from the last time I had thrown up. Because I fixated on it so much, I have memorized the dates and times in my entire life in
Wow.
which I have thrown up. Because for me, throwing up was just such a traumatizing experience. And it all goes back to a time, and I remember this, it was like 1998 or something. We were coming home from church at night, and I was sick all day. Well, I felt sick, but I hadn't thrown up yet, and we were in the car driving home, and I remember throwing up, and I remember my grandmother screaming at me, like, like, like you are disgusting, blah, like just eviscerating me for throwing up, and that was the catalyst. After going to therapy, and I was able to piece it together, that was the catalyst that started my phobia of throwing up, because I didn't associate. I mean, yeah, it sucks to feel it. It's not a good thing to feel, even though it's a natural thing to happen.
Mhm.
But because of that interaction, it made it feel unnatural to me and traumatizing, and it connected it to shame. So that's like ever since then, I had fixated on it so much. I'd be like, oh, it's been 10 years to the day since I've thrown up. Let me get through this 10-year threshold and I'm fine. And then fast forward to February 2023, February 13th, 8:30 p.m.,
Okay.
2023.
Okay.
I threw up for the first time in 10 years, and it was not as terrible as I thought it was going to be. But I remember crying afterward. I was like, "Oh my god, I did it! It happened!" And I texted my therapist, and she was like, "We're having a session this Friday. We're going to use this to our advantage." But sometimes we have fixations and we don't know about it. Sometimes they're so subliminal that we're not aware of it. And
Mhm.
I think therapy helped me unpack that really strange unearthed nugget of trauma that I didn't really know that I had.
I can understand that. I mean, because there's a lot of things that I have uh, figured out, come through, whatever you want to call it, through therapy. And it was like, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would be able to say, okay, well, I understand that now, or I didn't think about that, or wow, that really happened. I mean, I really did that.
Or wow, did I was I so up in my head about it that I was just kind of
Right.
being delusional. Like I know for me I will denial is like my middle name sometimes. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but sometimes for me it
I
is.
try not to do that. I try not to do that. I mean, but that's taken me a long time not to do that, you know,
Yeah.
and is because when I don't do that, then I'm owning what I've done. And that's kind of what my former husband used to always say: if you do something, own it. If Be proud of it. If you mess up, okay, I did it. What are you going to do to me? I mean, seriously. And just about anything that you do, just about anything, not everything, but just about anything you do, think about this. If it's wrong, what are they going to do to you? I mean,
Right.
seriously, they're not going to kill you, right?
Right.
So it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I messed up. Okay, you know, you know, put a little slap my hand and say, don't do it again. Okay, but because we fixate on what could happen,
Mhm.
we just kind of like go overboard. It's like it just escalates and it gets worse and worse and worse, and then when you finally get to the point where you have to do something about it, you're like, that wasn't that hard. That wasn't that hard. Now, this goes back to a conversation we had. I don't know if it was last time or the time before that, about going through some sort of ordeal. And while we're going through it, we're like, oh my God, that's so hard, and blah, all the rest of that stuff. But when you get over onto the other side, it's like, why did I even think that was so hard? That wasn't hard at all.
It's
You know,
like the mountain that I saw on the horizon is actually an anthill, and I've gotten over it.
right, right. So, so those are mental fixations there. And yes, I have done several of those before. And then, so now if I go into something that's a little traumatic, um, I try to remember, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
going through a hard spot right now. In really, when you get to the end, it's not going to seem as hard as it was that you were thinking it was during that particular time frame.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because our brain just makes it worse and worse than what it is.
It's like a little hamster on a wheel, and our brain's like, just going and going and going.
Mine are getting tired.
My hamsters, my hamsters are on caffeine, name it. That's what they're on. So I think this is a mental fixation that a lot of people might be able to relate with. And I know that it's one that both of us have struggled with before in the past, but the mental fixation of worrying about what other people think.
Oh, that's a hard one.
That's a real and the thing is, what makes this one difficult is sometimes you get through it and you think that you're through it, but then somebody says something, or somebody doesn't say something, or they don't show up, or they don't do what, it brings us back to that point of well, maybe they hate me. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe they don't like me. Maybe I suck as a person, right? It kind of creates that spiral of self-deprecation
Yeah.
that you fixate on. Now, for me, it's not as bad as it used to be. I'm able to kind of I think therapy has done this for me as well. I'm able to rationalize and ask myself questions of Donny, how rational is your thinking right now? Is it just random happenstance, or do you think the person is actually mad at you for a reasonable reason? And usually I'm able to be it's kind of random what I'm worrying about, and I am kind of taking it and running with it like an Olympic torch you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Yep.
How where are you on that? Like, do you
Uh,
experience that?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Actually, I've experienced it a couple of times this last week. But what I've realized, and you're talking, and it's like, that's all a part of fear. I had a friend that I was going to see, or I called and left a message. I text and I didn't get any answer. I called, or was it the opposite way around? Might have been the opposite way around. And I called and I didn't get an answer. So it's like, okay, it's did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong, or and stuff like that? And then and because all I wanted to let her know I was coming over to the West Branch, and I wanted to meet up with her to see how she was doing and stuff like that. And it was just it was a fear, and finally I told my brains, like, shut up and let's go do this. So I went over there, knocked on the door. She was just busy,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, well, what a ding dong. I mean, I'll give you an example too. When I contacted you the first time via text or message, I didn't know if you got it or not. Thinking, oh, did I say something wrong or
Oh,
whatever,
no.
about the show. And then I messaged you, because I couldn't message, because when the
Mhm.
debacle happened with Facebook, it took me out for the whole day. And then when it let me back in, it said that I had done something wrong. So I was in Facebook jail for the first time ever for 24 hours.
Oh, when there was that big outage, I do remember,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, it was just kind of a crazy thing, and it's like, oh man, and even then I'm thinking, oh man, what did I do? What did I do? And I just think it was a messed up deal.
I mean, I felt that way before too. Like, I remember, I think it was like, was it like 2019 or 2020? We went a long time without talking to each other. And I was like, oh my God, does Brenda hate me? And then I was like, Brenda does not hate me. We are busy people, but
We
Brenda
are
does
busy
not
people,
hate me. But it
right?
was just like, you get in those like vulnerable moments where like little seeds of doubt are like planted in your mind and you're like, they
Yeah.
kind of like germinate into giant gangly cactuses of anxiety, dancing around awkwardly. And it's just like, does the person really hate me? Or am I just kind of like taking something small and inflating it and making it something that it isn't?
That's kind of where it is right there. Is you're taking something small and you're making a big deal out of it. But not everyone goes through that.
No, which I
It's,
envy those people.
yeah, it's different personalities go through different things. If you have someone that's out there bigger in life and they don't really care what everybody else says, they don't think about that stuff at all. But when you
Mhm.
get someone who are like, say, yourself and me, or me and you, or however you want to say that, see, there you go. It was like, I just said that all wrong. It was like a step fix it. And it was like, let it go.
It was
Let it go.
perfectly said. It was understood.
Right, it was understood, but in my mind, I was like, "Oh, you just said that wrong." So those are some of the things. Not everyone really cares, because they care about something different. But because you and I happen to be empaths, number one, and we're very intuitive, number
Yeah.
two, and sometimes those two really don't mix when you have your mind saying, oh, well, you screwed up, or I wonder if I messed up because they haven't contacted me back, or so on and so forth. And many people do that. I mean, women do that with men when they text men, and men don't text them back. Men do the same thing back and forth. It's like, well, how come they're not, they must be messing around, or they must be doing this, or and then really they're just
Yeah.
busy. They're just
Well, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned the empath part because I think that emotional awareness is one of those reasons why we do that because we're always so worried about how other people are feeling, sometimes oftentimes at our own expense, right?
yes.
Like we don't think about like, okay, like yeah, I'm so caught up in how everybody else feels, their perspectives on things, like what am I feeling? What is my perspective? Like where is the space that I should own in this dynamic, right? Like my therapist telling me, ooh, this really got me, but her telling me that I deserve to exist in the spaces that I inhabit, mind blowing to me. Like that, like right there took like a dozen mental fixations that I have and punched them right in the mouth. Just like,
Yep. Do you know? Do you want to know why?
my.
We are people pleasers.
Oh no, we are, aren't we?
Yeah, we are people pleasers. So we fixate on pleasing other people and putting ourselves in the back, behind them, and thinking that we're not worthy, or we're not this, or we're not that, or we don't have a place, or we don't have a time, we don't have, so many things. But it's because we are people pleasers, and we want to make people happy, and stuff like that. And we sacrifice ourselves and our wants and our needs to please other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does that really do to us? That
Yeah.
takes away everything from us. And no one else did it. We did it. We did it to ourselves.
Well, and because we really want to please people so badly, that means that instead of like giving the usual 100% of effort, we're always striving for that 110%, that
Exactly.
120%.
Yep.
And then that developed, like you were saying earlier, those expectations, that creates those expectations in our minds that we're going to get 120% back.
Yeah.
And
Never,
then
ever
oh,
happens.
never. And then we'll end up getting like maybe 70, 80% back if that's if we're
If,
lucky.
yeah.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
And we'll just lose ourselves in that. We'll be like, okay, am I not worth the effort? Am I not worth that level of emotional investment, right?
Right.
And the truth is, not everybody is as emotionally self-aware as those of us who are empaths are, right? But
Mhm.
also, I don't think that we should place that level of expectation on other people who may not have the bandwidth to give, or who may not be at the point where they have the self-awareness, the emotional self-awareness to be able to reciprocate, right?
Right.
Because I don't think everybody is at that level, nor should they have to be.
Well, here's a thought. Okay. How can we expect other people to give us what we need if we're not giving ourselves what we need?
Yeah. But that very thought-provoking, right? Well, because I think of it as we are our own example first before we are an example to other people,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And the truth is, if people can't see us, you know, doing what we need for ourselves, then they're not going to see that example, especially if they are in the space where they don't know how to do that, right? Because not everybody does.
Right.
So I like for those of us who are the way we are, like I think that we kind of like lead by example. Not everybody wants to be in that position because it's not always the best position to be in because it
Mhm.
usually means we give 120, we get back 70 or 80, right?
Right.
But no, like I think that's a very thought-provoking point. I think that that's something that we need to examine more.
Well, and we need to put boundaries on our own time, our own space, our own being. We need to set boundaries with people because that's exactly what they've done to us.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
You
And we
know,
have to
I'm not advocating getting back at anybody, but I'm just saying is you need to set boundaries too. Because if you don't set boundaries, how are they going to know what your boundary is?
mhm.
What is your
No, yeah.
expectation? If you want them to treat you a certain way, you need to teach them to treat you a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and sometimes you just have to be upfront with it too, which can be
Excuse me.
sometimes you have to be upfront with it too, which can be extremely intimidating, right? Because some people legitimately don't realize that they might be being dismissive or that they might be kind of bulldozing over your feelings or
Right,
overdoing it with boundaries, right?
right.
Sometimes you got to communicate it because, again, not everybody has the same level of emotional self awareness. That's what makes it so difficult.
Yes, yes. And that's something that, individuals like us, we have to understand. We have to realize that.
I
And
know. Well, go ahead.
I'm saying, and we have to take our own initiative to preserve us.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if we're expecting them to be and do like what we do, well, then we have to kind of expect that from other people, you know. And now I don't mean like just expect it. I mean, you need to show them that that's what you expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thought that I just had, and this is a
Or
question that I
need.
used or need, yeah. This is another question that I would ask myself. Um, you're Donnie, you're giving 120%. Are you giving that 120% for the right reasons?
Very good one.
Are you doing it because you know you're going to get something back? Because maybe that will validate. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I think reciprocation's important and validation's important. But
Mhm.
if you go into it with that sole reason and that sole, oh, keyword, expectation, what is that going to do? Right? So, like, I think once I started realizing that that's what I was doing, that I scaled back that 120%. Like, I was like, nope, that's a boundary I'm creating. It actually pissed people off too, because when people get used to you giving 120%
Yep,
and you pull back to 100%, that's noticeable.
it is.
That's going to be noticeable, right?
And they get upset because, well, you're not giving it to me now. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, you know, you have to be true to yourself. And that was a lesson that I just learned. Even though I knew it, I just learned it. Um, that anytime that I'm gonna do something, I need to do it for me. Okay, if I do it for me, um, everything will turn out. I won't. I'm not doing it because I expect to get this from you or whatever. And there, you know, we talked about the bad side of expectation, but there is other sides of expectation.
Yeah,
But we have to teach people. Like I said, we have to teach people
definitely.
what we want and what we need in our life. Um, so I just kind of like went this way and come back again. Now I lost myself.
No, I see, but I see where you were going. So if we do look at the good side of having those types of expectations, I think one good thing that makes it teachable for other people is that sometimes our expectations can hold other people accountable when they're simply not carrying their weight, when they're not investing,
Yep.
or at least hold them accountable to the extent where they're able to communicate, like, hey, Donnie, hey, Brenda, I don't have the bandwidth to give even 80% right now. You know, if
Mhm.
they're able to communicate that, then that at least makes it a little bit easier to process,
Right.
right?
You
But
know,
not everybody does communicate that because they don't know
that's
how to.
that's true. That's true. You know, and one of the big things that just popped into my head was appreciation. You know, we give to be appreciated.
Yeah.
And when we're not appreciated, we don't know how to stop and say, okay, that's enough. You know, let me go somewhere else or let me do something else. Not necessarily with that individual, but um, appreciation. I mean, if you're showing appreciation to someone and then you do things for them and they don't appreciate you, why stay in that situation? Why do it?
Hmm.
Because you're not being validated.
Yeah.
And you need
Absolutely.
to be validated just like they need to be validated.
Hmm. They do, or you do. Yeah. And but going back to, because I know like earlier we were kind of like, don't have too many high expectations for validation, right? But I like, it is true, like I think some validation is healthy as human
Yes.
beings. Like I think it's one crucial aspect to empathy is being able to provide validation and receive validation as well.
Mhm.
And I think because there are schools of thought out there and people out there who think that you should not get validation at all. Like validation is dumb. Like who wants to be coddled with validation? And I really worry about the mental health of people who say that, because to me that suggests that they've not had validation or they don't know how to give it.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think that receiving and giving validation are very crucial to the human experience, very crucial to community building, crucial to empathy building, all of that jazz. How can we maintain a society without those things?
Well, you know, and the thing is, it all depends on the person's background and how they were brought up and what they
Yes.
went through as a young child, because they only we're when we grow or when we are born in for several years after that, and some like myself continue to feed me information. You're a head full of mush, and your mush is like things are going in all the time, and then and if you're being fed the wrong information, uh then that's what you're going to give out is what you've learned.
Yeah. It
So
creates a habit.
right, right. So if you're not validated, or you're not what do they call that? Oh, I forget the name anyways. But if you're not, if there's no confirmation there, if there's no praise there, if there's no thank you there, if there's no anything, then you're going to get someone who is steely. Steely is like, and that's what they're going to give
Mm,
out to the world. And then
yeah.
some people, when they go to college or when they go get a job, and they see these people are like, no, this is the way it's got to be, boop, 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 boop. And they see those individuals, going up the ladder. That's the way they feel that they have to be. But if you have someone who's personable, someone who cares about people, and someone who still, helps them up while you go up, sometimes that's frowned upon from the higher echelon, saying, that's not how it's done. You need to let that go. You need to stop being so personal with them. But that's not what's needed today.
Hmm.
Today, we need to have passion for one another. We need to help one another, any way that we can without being used.
Yes, 100%. Well, and the thing is, like, I think that if we look at generational dynamics, because you and I are a part of different generations,
Yes, we are.
I think you can see that there are different types of trauma that each generation harbors as a result of not having validation. I would argue that people in my generation probably had a little bit more validation than people in your generation, right? Like, I know, like, granted, both of our generations were kind of taught this, like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like, climb a hill in 10 feet of snow to get to school both ways, uphill. Like I get like that there is that like survival mentality, and I think that it's important for people to have the skills to be able to emotionally navigate difficulty, right?
Hmm.
But again, there's that line. Like if there is no empathy and no validation
There you
peppered in there, it's going to
Yep.
be a very bland stew of life, if that makes sense.
It is true
Not
because
to use a food reference, but it is
you must be
lunchtime.
hungry. um, but no, you're right, because you need to have validation. You need to, when you're growing up, you need that validation. And I'm just going to use a proverbial name, but hey Johnny, you did great, or hey Johnny, you didn't do so great, but let's take a look and see how we can make it better. You don't get that extra bit there. You either get, you did great, or you didn't do good at all.
Yeah.
You know,
Like there is no extra like if you're gonna give me a shit sandwich, at least put some seasonings on it. I mean, honestly, right? That's kind of
but
what we're talking about.
right. But I mean, the thing is if you're going to condemn someone, or if you're going to say someone did something wrong, well, help them to be able to get it right then.
Yeah,
And, and I have to throw another pressure wrench in here. What someone's right isn't necessarily everyone's right.
good point.
So it might be right for you at that particular time, or that boss or whatever, but it might not be the correct way of doing it. And then you have to go back and go even a little bit deeper. What is the correct way?
Oh yeah, yeah.
If it gets done, what is the correct way? I learned that when I was out at the outlet center, because I was always used to doing, okay, you got to do this, 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 this. And then it's like, that's not how I would send that out. But yet someone else will like foop, 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 throw it together and not be as nice and needy and everything else. And then they come back with awards, and it's like,
Yeah, as a writer, oh my God, I totally get that. I totally get that. And it's just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Now, like, and I think jobs like that as well, like when I was like much younger, like building experience, I realized that like perfection is everyone's definition of perfection is drastically different, right? And I had to learn to accept that too, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I can't force other people to my level of perfection. They can't force me to their level of perfection, because that's just going to create like
Friction.
confrontation.
That's
It's
right.
going to create friction, you
Yep.
know. Don't get me wrong, I love me a little drama from time to time, but it can be exhausting.
It can be tiring for me sometimes.
Absolutely, it can be tiring. But, you know, those are where we have those learning experiences too. And I think if we are in those situations, like, I do think it's important for us to learn and adapt and to not mentally fixate. But I also think it's important for us to stay true to ourselves too.
That's the biggest thing right there is staying true to yourself. And it's very important that you do, because you can't do things the way other people do them, because number one, the way that you do things, the way your thought is, then you may be, I'm just going to throw this out there, you may be a common sense individual, and you're getting something from an individual who is totally book smart,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have any common sense. You don't look at the things the same way as that individual who is book smart, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't look at the same way at things as you do for being using your common sense.
Yes, so the street smarts versus, but yeah, like, because one's rooted in experience, one's rooted in understanding the theory behind it.
Correct.
Like, and I think that sometimes, depending on the person, I think everybody has kind of like a Venn diagram of book smarts versus street smarts, right? And some people have more than the other, but I think understanding how to like navigate between those is what's important, right?
Right. And understand that way. I mean, I had a gal that I was working with, and she did she put together something totally different than I would have put it together. And I had to realize that if it comes out right in the end, what makes the difference in how they get there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was a big aha for me. They didn't have to do it the way that I wanted them to do it, because that's how I knew how to do it. Well, it wasn't that easy for them, so they did it the way that they knew how, and it still come out, in the end the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are at the end. Well, it's hard to believe already we're at the end of our conversation because it's
I
been
know,
going
right?
by so quickly. And we had many fixations and they were great. I love it.
Yeah, we
So
did.
I guess the final question is how, like, I mean, what advice do we have for people who might be overcoming or navigating through these different types of things, these fixations, these worries that they might be having?
Number one is stay true to yourself. Okay. And don't necessarily always be a people pleaser, because that puts you in a state of despair, depression, whatever. But do whatever makes you happy and take care of yourself, you
Yes.
know, show people how to take care of you. Ask for help, because most of the times when you're a giver, you don't ask for help. And you really need to ask for help. You need to learn that, because that's the only way that you're going to feel validated or helped or whatever it is. So you got to take care of you. So
Yeah.
that's easy to say, but harder to do, or more of a challenge to do. And we try to overcome that every day, every day.
Yeah.
But start taking care of yourself.
And
Do it for
so
you, not for them.
I'll add a number two to that. If you were even tempted to deliver 120% when you're not getting anywhere near that, just don't. Own your time, own your bandwidth, own
Mhm.
your worth, because if you know you're not going to get that reciprocated, then it's time to scale back. And there's no shame in doing that. And I know you might think that people might look at you differently or be upset at you, or, but if you have to do that for your own well-being, then I think that's what you need to do, you know?
Yep.
And then number 3, therapy can be our best friend. If you have the means, bandwidth, and accessibility to such, I always encourage it because it's been very helpful for me.
Likewise, and it's funny because I was just talking to my therapist the other day, and actually it was a group of gals that we got together for the VA, and I mentioned that this is my 4th time coming back.
Mm,
You think that one time or the little session that you go through, series of sessions, that you've gotten it all, and maybe you might have at that particular time, but don't be afraid to go back and ask and get back into it again, because you learn
yeah,
something all the time. Do not be ashamed of that, because it is needed. It is needed, and it makes you feel better and more
absolutely.
understood.
I think that's the perfect spot to wrap this up. So, Brenda, what part of our mission statement is the biggest piece of advice of all for people to do?
I love this, and I'll continue to tell you guys this from now until eternity. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. Namaste.
Love you all. Bye, everyone.